All right. Hello, hello. Very kind of late getting to the game here today. But kind of what's going on is I had a lot of trouble finding the colors that I'm supposed to be using. So we're going to just make do with what we do have. And I'm going to just go ahead and get started painting. So I've got my trusty iPad and I'm going to flip this around. Hello, hello. And set this up. So, let's see if we can set this up. I got a tripod here. Still figuring out the kinks here. There we go. I'm not going to be able to actually see the camera because I've got it flipped around. But I'll just keep talking and I'll try to pop my head in every once in a while and see if I can say hello. So we've got two paintings we're working on right now. Number one is going to be this black and white Vanitas. I was using Cold Black from Williamsburg to make this painting. That was 2 weeks ago. It was really messy, really wet. Now this whole painting is dry. There's nothing that's still wet on there. But we'll go through and do some alternative tools. I've got some chisels and some gouges that I can scrape through. I've got a paint roller here, or a printmaking roller. So I'm going to kind of go through and do that. The other painting that we are working on is an abstracted landscape. This one we started last week. And it's based on a landscape photo that I found online, and going to try to build it up using a palette knife. I may not go too much on that this week only because I didn't find my palette knife. I can probably use some of these gauges and scrapers and gouges, but I want to be careful because this is stretched canvas and these are extra sharp. They could probably just cut right through really quick. So I think if I'm going to get started, I'm going to probably try to just start by kind of laying out my colors. I'm going to put my palette out here. And I've got two sets of colors. I think I'm going to just stick with Cold Black today on this painting. So I'm going to put a little bit of that out. And I might put some in the middle because I think I'm going to mix some up right away. And I've got a titanium white as well. So I'm going to put a little bit of that over there to the side. And I'm going to put these two together. I'm going to mix those. And my plan was to try and use something. The title for this project is Alternative Tools. So using tools that are not necessarily traditionally thought of as painting tools. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of roll up a little bit of a gray here and get that kind of started. I think I want it a little bit darker than that. Get a little more paint. All right. So instead of printmaking ink, I've got some paint. So what I can do is, I'm thinking I'm going to kind of maybe even out some of the background. I have a still life that I set up with a kind of skull cast and a Stein here. And I'm just going to kind of try pulling some of this around, maybe kind of destroying some of the edges randomly. I think it's going to take quite a bit of paint to do anything or to make anything kind of change or look different. We'll see what happens. Part of this in the alternative tools concept is experimenting with things that are not paintbrushes and trying to see if that doesn't kind of step you outside of your normal comfort zone of tools to use for painting. So I'll just kind of find some little spots here and there. Maybe I'm going to go a little darker now. I kind of like the randomness of some of this. I'm going to allow it to break some of this up, do some different things to it. I don't have to do this everywhere. What I was telling my students is, I want you to use these alternative tools. They don't have to make the whole painting. They just have to be part of the painting process at some point. And then you can kind of decide what else you want to do. So I think I'm going to call that good for the roller. It's kind of got a little bit of, hiding and disguising some of those edges, breaking those up a little bit. See if I can open this box here and get some of these tools out. I feel like I'm grabbing at the wrong end. There we go. Oh. Broke the box. All right. I'm going to get this one. It doesn't have a super sharp edge like some of the others. And I'm just going to use the edge of it to grab some paint. And, you almost could think of like Bob Ross and, playing around with edges. So I'm going to use it kind of like a palette knife. Getting some paint and kind of playing around with edges. I can put a lot of paint down or a little bit of paint. I can kind of choose how much I want to grab. This is a little bit sharper than I thought it was. So I think I want to be a little bit careful how I apply the paint. If I had a thicker amount of paint, I could probably go through and scratch into it. But for now, let's just see what this does. Maybe I'll try to spread that out a little bit. Grab this other corner. Gotta be careful. Every so often I feel this knife kind of almost like grabbing some of the edge. Let's find some other alternative tools. So this was tool number 2. I think I can clean this up just fine. I'm gonna use a domino. Only because it's got a nice smooth surface. I could probably play around with that. I'm sure I could put some paint on it, and I'm sure it will clean up pretty easy. So I'm going to grab a little bit of white paint and maybe see if I can, add some texture to maybe some of these highlights. So far, I kind of like it. Kind of different. It's kind of like using a card or some kind of, smooth palette knife. I'm actually not even minding it at all. Something a little bit different. Yeah. Let's see what it looks like with some highlights over here. Maybe draw a little bit of that cup back in. Doing something a little bit. Yeah. Unexpected. Kind of fun to paint with so far. You miss class, Bryn? So do I. Class is fun. I miss being able to see what everybody's working on and get inspired by that and kind of keep going. But hopefully this will all be over soon enough. But not too soon. All right. I kind of like that. I'm going to clean this off. I'm going to use some darks now and see if I can build up some of those darker shadows. Everything was blending before with the wet paint that I had, so I'm gonna see if I don't get a nice dark gray and start to build up some of these edges. It's kind of like having a really kind of big, smooth palette knife / brush. And I can just use a little bit, or I can use a lot. The more pressure I put, the more I mess around with it, the more paint that goes down, the more I just kind of put it down and leave it alone. The more I don't affect things. And I'm not going to get rid of all of this, but I may come back and start to use my brush and, fix some things, redraw a little bit. And kind of test this out a little bit. See what I feel like works. This other eye socket's starting to get a little lost. Whoa! That just shot across the room. Be aware of projectile dominoes when you're painting with them. So it's, starting to build up a little bit of paint on there. But I'm sure with enough soap and water, this will come off. All right, let's get just a little bit more. Then maybe I'll move on to the next thing. A cup would be good. Almost anything that you have kind of sitting around the house that you wouldn't normally paint with, just grab it and try it. Stuff from the kitchen is a good idea. I agree. And I'll hold this up so I can kind of see it a little bit better, more straight on. I kind of like what this is doing. I think I might just do a little bit more and then kind of leave it so that I can kind of come back to it another time. And see if there's anything I want to do with it once it's dry. Yeah, I think that's, maybe I want a little highlight somewhere in there. All right, so I think I am going to leave this one here. I think that's as far as I'm going to go, and I want to talk about the simple palette and using a palette knife. We might not get to too much painting today, but I can at least set that up. So this is, I guess, stage 3 of this painting. First stage, I tried to scratch into it with paint. I had too much paint, so I had to wipe it completely down. Then we redrew and painted it a little bit, wet in wet. So now we wanted to add some alternative tools. So I used the paint roller. I used a gouge knife, and then finally a domino. So there's 3 different ones we could try. And from there, I'll go ahead and put this to the side, let it dry for a while, probably go back to it next week to try and finish it. You'll see all my canvases are hexagons right now. It was the last type of canvases that I picked up before we went into lockdown mode. So it's all the canvases I have. I have some other stuff, but I want to save those bigger pieces for our final project, which I'll try to maybe get started in between now and next week. So I'm going to take this palette. So this is what my palette looks like. Just had a couple colors there. I'm going to put that to the side so it can kind of dry. And I want to set up something so we can kind of look at the Simple palette. So the Simple palette is a concept by Mark Carter, an artist out in Texas. And it's basically the idea that you have just 5 colors. And so I'm going to lay those out. So first off is kind of like a French ultramarine blue. So a nice dark blue. Next, I have a replacement for this because I don't have an alizarin, but normally it would be an alizarin crimson. This is actually quite dark. This is Old Holland Madder Crimson Lake Deep Extra. So it's pretty close to the same color. It's a dark, cool red. The next one that we want to use is a Burnt Umber. I can't seem to find any at the moment. So I'm going to kind of use 2 different colors. I've got a Dutch Brown and by Williamsburg, and over here I have a Raw Umber. So Raw Umber compared to Burnt Umber is cooler. It kind of has more of a purplish to it. But so I've got brown, blue, red. Then my last 2 colors are yellow and white. So I've got an Old Holland yellow. I thought I had a different yellow, but I don't. So this is their fancy type of yellow. I can't even pronounce it. I have the way that I call it, but it's not the same thing. And then finally I have a titanium white. The other week I used a Permalba white, which dries really slow. This will dry a little bit quicker. So this is a Michael Harding's titanium white. So I have these colors, and I have my landscape. It's going to be on a screen that you won't see. I'll maybe try to show it to you later. But I'm going to kind of try to find and mix colors based on just mixing these. So if I want something kind of in the black range, I might mix the blue and the brown together. Those 2 together, you know, brown's kind of like a dark orange, blue and orange together make a neutral, so you get something kind of close to black. If you need it to get a little bit warmer, you can go towards the red. If I need an orange, I can mix over here. If I need a green, I can mix over here. If I want to go between these 2, I get more of a purple. So there's kind of a big range of colors you can get with just these. I think looking at what tools I do have right here, I would rather mix some of these colors. So I'm going to kind of pre-mix some little mixtures down here on my palette before I start to paint, so that I kind of have some of them available. The first one I see is kind of like an orangish. So I'm going to kind of use some brown some yellow. I'm going to grab some white and see where this starts to kind of take me. It's kind of more of a pinkish orange. So I'm going to kind of keep mixing this in. You can definitely feel that I need some medium. The medium that I like to use in class is Neo Meg by Gamblin. And if I just dip my brush in this a little bit, my paint is going to loosen up. It's going to flow a lot more. So that's what I'm looking for. So I'm going to now get a little bit more yellow. I'm going to grab a little bit of this orangey, or the alizarin Madder Lake. I think I'm getting closer to the right color family, but now I'm dark. So I'm going to lighten it up a little bit. Feels just a little warmer than what's there. So I'm going to add a little more yellow to it. I think this will be good for an initial color. So this is the color that sits at the top of these mountain peaks. Basically, this is a lake in front of some mountains. The sun is setting, so you're getting that kind of like alpenglow effect where the very tips of the mountains are getting like this very, very last light kind of warm color. So that's kind of what I'm shooting for. Some of it's going to look the way it needs to look based on context. If you want something to look very orange, put it next to something blue. If you want something to look very pink, put it next to something green. So I'm going to kind of use a little bit of this, and even compared to what I had on there before, this is already looking very muddy and blah. I used a almost like a Naples red to block this in, so it's looking kind of like gray green to me. Keep playing around with this a little bit. I'm not really going to worry about the little details here at the beginning. I'm going to just kind of fill this in. I know that I was supposed to do this with a palette knife, but we'll kind of go back into this with a palette knife after maybe we kind of settle in some of the look of it. I'm going to keep trying for this. Oh, shoot. Just got some blue on my brush. So, I'm going to put this over to the side. Ruined my color. New brush. I don't even think, even though this color is a little bit better than the other one that I had, it's a little more kind of pinkish orange. I don't think any of those are going to work very well until I get some of the background put in. So I'm going to put that brush to the side. I'm going to go for some of this background sky color really quick so that I have some of it on there. I don't think until I get that blocked in that I'm going to see what I need to have. So I'm going to start with blue and add some white. I can see a little bit of, yellow in there, and maybe even a little bit of reddish pink. It's not a straight blue, it's a neutralized blue. We want it in the blue family and light colored, but not super strong. So 242, moving along. Keep this fairly light. Maybe get it just a little more purplish. I am just dropping everything today. Try not to make a mess, and that's how you make more of a mess. I guess. All right, let's try this out. Maybe just a touch more blue. So I'm going to start to put this, right against the skyline, right up here. I can always adjust these colors. That's kind of the beauty of oil paint, is if I have too much of one, if it's too dark, I can add some white to it and lighten it up. It's not dry yet. I can change it before it dries. If it's too dark, if it's not dark enough, I can add more of a deep value to it because it's still wet. So I'm going to try this and then I'll start to mix a little bit of a darker blue into some of this value as I go up in the sky. All right, let's add a touch of red and a touch of blue. Went just a little bit too far. All right, let's try that. So now I've got a little bit deeper color, a little bit darker, a little bit more blue. As I go up, I'm going to get a lot more blue, especially over to this left side, I think. So I'm kind of placing these next to each other, and then I can kind of blend in between them if I need to. Get a little bit more in here. Hey, Chip, how are you? I'm not looking at the screen, so if you don't hear me responding to what you type, it's because the camera and the screen is pointed at the painting and not me. So I peek around every once in a while, but I don't always see what people are typing. All right, then I'm going to go for even a deeper blue here. So I've got a little bit more blue there. And notice how when we started out, this looked very, I don't know, I would say it looked kind of gray and blah compared to this red. But now that we have the blue and it's a little bit stronger, I think that it's starting to push that into more of an orange realm. So I feel good about that part of it. A lot of this image is also in the shadows. So the shadow kind of starts at this next mountain range here and then continues down here. So there's snow here, and this is all a lake. So I'm going to probably get some of these colors and values in here in the reflection of the lake, but not much. Get a little bit darker blue. Even throw in a little raw umber here. And work a little bit of that into the very, very top. Hey, Omar. You've been gone a while. I hear you. Still go walking up in Hertham Heights, past your old house. In the neighborhood back kind of behind us by a bit. I'm going to bring some of this, I'm going to lighten it up just a hair because I can always come back and make it darker. I'm going to bring some of this into the reflection of the lake. So the lightest part is kind of here towards the middle. The trick is it's going to take some extra work to bring some of, the reflected pinks and, kind of more subtle colors into this. Right now, all I'm really trying to do is just get a little bit of the, most of some of the block in. I think that's all I kind of have time for and the ability to do today. Now these guys get quite a bit darker as they move out and over to the edges. So I'm going to grab some of these browns and some more blues, and these get quite a bit darker as it moves over towards the left and the right. Mostly what I'm doing with the brushes, I'm just kind of scrubbing some of the paint on there. I did not sand this canvas, so there's a good chance that I'm going to wear this brush down a little bit. But even though it's a nice brush, I've had it around for years and years, so I'm not too concerned about saving it too much. One thing to look for when you're painting like lake or water is that edge right up against, if you're looking across the lake, the far edge, when it's right up against the land and hits the shore, it's usually just a little bit darker in that area. All right, get a little paint here. Just bringing this in a little bit. For those of you just popping in, mostly what I'm doing, obviously we're doing online education these days, so I'm trying some different things out for my painting class. They are definitely the group that is out of my classes that like to be online the least. So digital and online and all that stuff. So I thought maybe trying to do an Instagram would be something that would make it a little bit easy to come and go as you please if you wanted to see it, and maybe I can kind of put it up. It'll be up, for a day or so, or maybe I'll pin it to my page so you can kind of rewatch it. And if I can save it, I'll just put it on YouTube, I think is what I said I would try to do. And in my Instagram profile, you can see the link to YouTube. I think the last thing I want to do, I think I've got just a couple minutes here till I get to 3 o'clock or so, is this snow area. There's some other areas of snow that I think I want to try to add some to. So I'm going to kind of mix up a snow color. It's mostly like a cool blue. It's not a true white, because it's in the shadow. It's reflecting a lot of the sky. So I'm going to kind of put this in, and I may go back in and try to adjust parts of this. I still have a lot of blue on my brush, which is probably not ideal, but we'll go through and add a little bit of this here. Doesn't necessarily make sense yet. We'll keep bringing up the value a little bit with some white. The value here needs to be a lot brighter than what's down inside the lake area. Got some other areas on these rocks on the side. I am going to be abstracting this landscape, so it doesn't have to be perfect, and I don't have to get it exact. And even some of that up into some of these areas. I think I'm fine if some of this starts to blend together. It's still got some wet paint on it. Lots of snow back behind this hill here, which is a lot darker, and I'm going to have to add some of that in there. See if I can get just a little bit more up and over here. This area's got some snow into it. There's some spots of snow here down on the front side of the lake. I think I'm just going to clean off my brush and try to maybe work on that sky just a little bit since I've got a couple minutes left. All right, let's see, where's my image? I don't know. This is coming along slow, and I'm not a super fan of what's going on, but just trying. I'm going to start out with a light color, and now I'm just going to kind of feather this up, and I might add a little bit of kind of like a whitish pink to some of the paint as it's right along that horizon. So I'm going to grab a little bit of white, tiny bit of this Madder Lake Crimson, maybe the tiniest touch of yellow to warm it up. Too much. A little more pink, a little more white, a little medium. All right. And I'm going to just try to, some of this area down at the very bottom, feather a little bit of this in. This is just like a underpainting still. I wish I had my easel here at home, but I don't. And to figure this out with a camera and get good angles is tricky. So kind of just making do with what I've got. That and try to do this while the kids are running around upstairs. But I haven't heard any screams for a while, so that's good. A little bit of snow on the top of that mountain. Starting to blend and mix a little bit too much. In the end, if it feels like it's a mountain and it has some snow and there's a lake, then I'm just going to say that's good enough. Keep it abstract. What I keep trying to say over and over is do enough that it feels like what it's supposed to be, but that you can do it with as least amount of paint and as least amount of overdrawing as possible. All right. I think for what I'm going to do, that's about all I've got. So let's see if I can grab this without turning it off. Slide it out. Hello world. So hopefully that was fun for you. Some of you said hello. Some of you were able to come and see. This is the photograph that I'm working from. You can see that video on YouTube. There's a link in my profile. Other than that, this is stuff for painting 1, painting 2, FA 214 or 218, excuse me. I can show you my messy palette and my little paint zone here in my basement. But have a good day, and I think I am going to sign off. See you later.